On today's show, the San Diego Padres' woes continue as they fall to the Cincinnati Reds by a score of 5-2. Evaluating the loss, is there any positive we can take from it, Jurickson Profar? And what are the negatives, including the bottom of the order, the bullpen being weird, and so much more? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, April 30th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, where I write about not just the Padres, but general baseball stuff as well, and I host a podcast for them about fun baseball culture stuff. And it is called Baseball versus the World, which you can follow on Twitter as well. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, though, remember to follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. We're free and available on all platforms, as you know, this here Locked On Padres podcast, your team every day. A little bit late on today's episode because the game went late and your boy was tired, but it is okay because I am back with some thoughts. And frankly, I will say a couple things, man. I think it's good for me to be like, you know what, I need to take a few steps away because like many of you listeners, and I imagine many of you listeners have probably been on Twitter, the application before, it's tough out here and you don't want to overreact and freak out and start, complaining about everything under the sun. But I can't blame people that are, man. I really just can't. It's been that bad. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you, though, by Monopoly Go. And look, I'll admit it, I have a competitive side. And every now and then, that competitive side, it's a big fan of competing. And especially so with Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Today's episode, guys, we're going to be recapping the game as well as going over some of your responses, just because I thought that they were kind of fun, on whether or not you're more concerned about Michael King or Joe Musgrove. So that's what we got on the docket for today. And let's begin, of course, now talking about the game recap. And frankly, not too much happens in this one. Like, realistically, not too much happens. The game starts off awesome. The vibes are immaculate, as always, with Jurickson Profar hitting a solo shot off of the boy Nick Lodolo, who basically for the rest of the game kills the Padres. But Profar absolutely killed it. Didn't necessarily have the home run. It's not a home run that was like the biggest bomb in the world, but 20 out of 30 ballpark, so it wasn't lucky either. Shouts to him. Unfortunately, though, that is quite literally the rest of the positives for the Padres for the rest of this game, basically. And I do want to say, Jurickson Profar started to scare me in the sense that, like, I don't know if he's, like, genuinely taking a next leap in his career. He's starting to look like why he was such a, like, highly regarded prospect all those years ago. And don't get me wrong, if I just go based on numbers, like, this should go down at some point. But a weighted on base of 393 and an expected weighted on base of 359, there is a huge, discrepancy there. But it's so, he's been doing so well that even if he has been a little bit lucky, my thing is, like, I'm starting to wonder if Profar, like, might have figured something out. To me, it's the fact that he gets on base so much that's been so unbelievable to me. His walk rate is 13.9%, which is the best of his career since 2017 when he had a 12.9% walk rate. So for me, it's been awesome. And I love that he's been the leadoff hitter. I think it's worthy. It's funny. I had not considered it for some reason. I was thinking Ha-Seong Kim or Jackson Merrill because Jackson Merrill, he draws a lot of walks. He's got a good on-base streak. He makes good contact, and he's just a pesky at-bat. And same thing for Kim, who was the leadoff hitter last year and really excelled in that role. I didn't think about Profar, though, and the thing with him is that he's not chasing too many bad pitches. He's certainly not whiffing at them. He puts together a productive at-bat seemingly every time he's up. And I'm really starting to wonder if he might have figured something out. I don't know. It's way too early, but, like, last time with the Padres in 2022, I could be wrong. I'd have to look this up, and I probably should have looked it up before this episode. I'll share that with you tomorrow. Like, his start with the Padres was very good too, but I don't remember it being quite this good, and I don't remember it having the same level of, like, underlying metrics that don't immediately point to this guy's going to calm down, i.e. like his hard hit rate wasn't very high. He was, swinging at too many pitches. His hard hit rate is okay. You know what I mean? So I think he actually might be figuring something out. And he's 31 years old, and he is the living testament right now to why you can't just use stats to discuss everything baseball and to predict everything baseball, and they're not all encompassing and final. And the same thing goes for the rest of the team, to continue the recap, because there are so many batters in this Padres lineup that if you pull up some of their underlying stats, that they look awesome. Your Jake Cronenworth, your Fernando Tatis Jr., Manny Machado to a smaller extent, because while he hasn't been amazing, his hard hit rate is already like, all of that stuff is still good, and it's been better than last year. Barrel percentage, all that stuff. Although he hasn't been consistent, and it's been really frustrating seeing that Machado just isn't in his heat check like crazy moment that he was in 2022 with the near and should have been MVP win. So it's both Profar doing well, and then it's the rest of the Padres team not doing very well, including one Fernando Tatis Jr., by the way, 0 for 4 in this game, continuing his massive slump. It reminds me of the slump that he went into, I believe, in August last year. The one where when he hit a home run at Petco, even though the fact that the Padres were out of the playoffs at that point, all the fans like lost their minds, and it was like this. That was another thing, by the way. Fans, I feel bad. Like, everyone's showing up to these games except for the team, apparently. So really rough. But yeah, rest of the game, basically nothing happens. At one point, I believe the Reds get 21 straight batters out without a hit. So they kind of like ostensibly no-hit the Padres for most of this game. With the exception of the Profar home run, everyone until, if I'm not mistaken, everyone until, I'm going to say... Let's see here. Yes, until Jake Cronenworth hits a double in the bottom of the ninth, everyone like refuses to get a hit. Really poor at bats, some bad ones. There was one succession of at bats. It was early on in the game. The Padres had drawn a couple walks, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I could find it. Not early on in the game, but it was, yeah, I remember. It was. Yes, it was Graham Pauley. No, who was it? I'm trying to find what inning it was. But there was a point in this game in which it was Jose Azocar, Eggy Rosario, and Kyle Higashioka. And part of this is that I think Nick Lodolo is kind of a stud, low-key, for the Reds. I really do think he's an amazing pitcher. But you have Xander Bogaerts drawing a walk. You have Ha-Seong Kim drawing a walk. Bottom second, my mistake. And then Eggy Rosario. The at-bats that these guys had, don't get me wrong, Nick Lodolo is a stud, in my opinion. But the at-bats that these guys have, go look up on Baseball Savant these at-bats and look at the pitches that they swung at. There's a difference between having some really like crazy movement on pitches that you get batters to swing at versus like, it's just Eggy Rosario. Like, I really like the guy. I like that he's finally getting a little bit more consistent playing time, especially against lefties. But there are at-bats that he has sometimes, particularly in high leverage situations like this one, where I'm like, what are you doing? Like, he has a little bit of that 2023 Padres energy where it's like he's hit a lot of home runs that feel like they haven't mattered, if you think about it, right? And don't get me wrong, I still appreciate seeing some results as opposed to like a Xander Bogaerts situation where like no matter what leverage it is, the guy isn't hitting. But Eggy Rosario has a little bit of that thing where like I feel like you're not hitting all those big home run things that gets everyone excited and gives you that huge WRC plus OPS against lefties when it actually counts. And in this case, he strikes out badly. Jose Azocar strikes out badly. Eggy Rosario's, he like check swings a ball that's like a foot up on top of the strike zone. That was bad. And then Azocar swings at sliders that are at his like feet. And then Higashioka goes down swinging too. The bottom of this Padres lineup is horrifying when you don't have Jackson Merrill and Luis Campusano in the game, or at least one of the two. Because Kyle Higashioka, God bless him, he's a good defensive catcher. He can't hit. Jose Azocar, while I think that he has decent like bat-to-ball skills, the bottom line is he just can't put the ball in play all that consistently. And yes, I understand that he had like a good batting average recently. It was all inflated by luck for the most part. He's not hitting a lot of line drives. It's mostly grounders that sneak through. He's just a defensive replacement, Azocar. And I do stand by my thought that I still think he should have got more playing time when Grisham was here. I'd rather just like to see what would happen if you played him a little bit more. Apparently we are seeing it though, so maybe I was wrong on that. So that wasn't great. And then you have, no Jackson Merrill, who's not going to put together. So the bottom of this Padres lineup, what stinks is that if you take out Campusano, I get it because his defense has been such a problem. But then in exchange, it puts a black hole at the bottom of the lineup. And it's especially bad if you don't have Merrill in the lineup. So going forward, I hope that she'll make sure that at least one of those two have to be in the lineup. One of those two. If Merrill's hurt or he needs a couple days off, I get it. But you need to figure out how to have at least one of those guys because then you have situations like last night where it's just really poor. Eggy should have done better than what he did, don't get me wrong. But even still, the bottom of that lineup can be scary. And I think you saw exactly why. And then other than that, Manny Machado drives in Jake Cronenworth's double in the bottom of the ninth inning, and then that's it. And then Bogarts hits a single, so congratulations to him, I guess. And then Kim strikes out to end the game, unfortunately. What can I say, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I could say a lot more, but before we get into a lot more, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a second to talk to you about our good friends over at FanDuel. Ladies and gentlemen, FanDuel, that's right. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Perhaps you saw Jamal Murray just taking a dagger to LeBron James' heart, and perhaps you had the over on that. Perhaps you had the under on that. I don't know what it was that you might have had, but FanDuel, what I do know is they have you covered for whatever kind of bet you want to make. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's 150 buckaroos if you win or lose. That's right, folks. Bet on everything from, 3-pointers made to dunks to, heck, you want to go hockey, you want to do slap shots, you want to do penalty overtime stuff. You could do that with baseball, home runs, stolen bases, strikeouts, innings pitched, whatever you want to do. Go check that out. All on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, your podcast for your team every day, free and available on all platforms. Whew, daddy-o. I didn't mention the pitching in this game. I did talk about Nick Lodolo, who was awesome, I think, in this game. I think he was 7 innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 11 Ks. But with the Padres' Matt Waldron, I saw some people just crapping on this guy. And he started off really poorly, right? He did start off really poorly, giving up the home run to Elly De La Cruz, who's one of the only batters that you should just be very, very cautious against, right? That happens at the top of the first inning. He homers 459 feet to deep center. But he's a knuckleball pitcher. That could happen sometimes. But then he finishes the game okay. Don't get me wrong. He stumbles early, but the fact that he's able to get to 6 innings, I thought was impressive. 6 innings, 4 earned runs on 6 hits, no walks though, and 4 strikeouts. Look, I was impressed by the fact that he didn't walk anybody. I thought that was great, especially because that team at that point, when you're up 4-1, should have no reason to keep pressing at the plate. Unless they're the Padres, because the Padres could be up and they're just let's make it easier for the other team and let's have really quick outs and on one pitch, right? Because they're very, very good at that. God, they have the plate discipline for the Padres, as a whole, as a team, it just seems like they always are so good at swinging on a pitch and then not putting it anywhere and just making it easier for the other team, right? That's what it feels like to me. But anyway, which is why I like Profar as a leadoff. He actually makes the pitchers work, I think, a decent amount. With Matt Waldron, look, I don't really get the criticisms of this guy. He's kind of delivered exactly what you look for out of a back-end starter, especially your number 5, and he occasionally can flirt with brilliance. He had the game against San Francisco where he didn't give up a run. He had the game at Colorado, by the way, which I do put some stake into. Even if the Rockies are bad, it is still Coors, where he only gave up 1 earned run. I just feel like he's been solid. Is he going to get torched by the right teams? Of course. Is this guy your future or anything like that? I don't think so as of right now, but he's been impressive, and the knuckleball every now and then can be kind of pretty impressive. It's hard for batters to hit that and make consistent contact and see where it's going, obviously. So I really enjoyed that. Yes, you have your Johnny Britos of the world. You have your Randy Vasquez's, and then eventually you're going to have your Adam Mazer or Robbie Snelling. But for now, I'm okay with it. Instead, the really bad thing is Tom Cosgrove. He comes into this game, shouts to the other guy who made an appearance in this game, but Cosgrove comes in, gives up an earned run. His ERA is at 10 right now. Look, and by the way, the past 3 games, he's given up a run, including 2 earned runs against Philly. I just he's this year's Chris Matt. That's what it feels like. He's this year's Nabil Crismatt. The regression hit big time. And while I do like his stuff, I do think he has decent stuff. I think that his pitches were generating a decent amount of swing and miss last year in areas that were really high leverage and when you needed him to. But this is a good example in what I had been talking about before the season, which is that I know that, again, stats don't tell the whole story. Obviously, that's been the theme of today's episode, I think. But Cosgrove did have a really low ERA last year. And yes, he did have some low expected ERA stats too, but I do think that if you have a 1.75 ERA and you have a stat that has xFIP, for example, at 4.91, that was one of the reasons I thought he would regress a little bit. I didn't think it'd be this bad. Again, this is this year's Chrismat, Luis Garcia, like a guy who was good in this Padres bullpen has fallen off. As tempting as it is to say this is classic Padres, like they just don't know how to like have people be just okay. I think that this is just like what happens with bullpens sometimes. Like, look at the Astros. Ryan Presley and Josh Hader have both been bad. I just think that relievers are really volatile. If the rest of the bullpen was bad, I'd be saying that this is a Padres issue, and especially with management and AJ Preller not putting it together well. But I think this bullpen has been really solid, and I think it could get better, as evidenced by Jeremiah Estrada, one of the only good developments for the team over these past few days. 2 innings, no hits, no walks, 2 Ks. Whew, and he throws heat. This guy might be the damn closer of the future. I know that this is like a bold, like hyperbolic take of mine, but this guy could be like the closer of the future. Like at this rate, like he's a top level prospect who everyone has been turning heads, including prospect people that I talk to and probably that you guys read before spring training, and they didn't put him on the team bus. They probably just wanted to give him some more reps, and that's fine. Like they did that, and then they brought him up, and he's been awesome so far. He's generating whiffs. The fastball is heat, like Robert Suarez almost level in terms of just how fast it's going. I've been really impressed with Estrada, and I love that he's gotten like multiple innings. Isn't that crazy? He's gotten 1 inning, 2 1/3, and 2 innings in his 3 outings so far. Like that's some good stuff, man. I really, really like it. So shouts to Jeremiah Estrada, one of the only cool recent developments for the Padres. I think that, it's nice to see that Jake Cronenworth, I think, has been really back. I've talked about this all year, that I just think he's been so phenomenally good. And the fact that he is able to go out and produce despite getting really unlucky in a lot of ways, as I've talked about before. His hard hit rate, all that stuff is through the roof. Just to give you an example, I mean, go look at his baseball savant sliders. And for a player like him, I do think the sliders do tell a lot, especially because of how he's performed these past few seasons. So it shows you this isn't some lucky fluke thing. This isn't Eric Hosmer at the beginning of, the beginning of the 2022 season when he was hitting like 400 or whatever. His expected weighted on base is 395 right now, and his weighted on base is 350. So like he's like the opposite of Profar a little bit. And by the way, it gives you just a little bit of a taste of the type of production tertiary stats that you might get from Profar if he starts to regress, which is exciting. You know what I mean? Like Cronenworth has been awesome, and it just feels like he's always been consistently there. He still shows fight, and he's trying, especially for a guy that's not supposed to be the big star of this team, the way that Manny Machado, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Xander Bogaerts are supposed to be. Tatis has been the best of the bunch, at least in my opinion. Not by a lot, though. Fernando Tatis Jr., of course, has been slumping big time, ladies and gentlemen. Over his last, let me just see if I can pull this up. Ever since, March 14th? Hold on. No, April 14th. So that's about, 10, 15 games or so. Over his last 67 plate appearances, Tatis is hitting 175 with a 284 on base, and most importantly, a 298 slugging. That's good for a 74 WRC plus. He's been terrible. And this is more than just a slump at this point. And we have to start looking at it and saying, okay, when is he going to wake up here? This is nuts. It really reminds me of last year, and while I will say that there's nothing that's changed in the data, I do think he has been getting a little bit unlucky. If you look at some of his more advanced stats, right? Weighted on base is 268 right now. And then in terms of like expected, I don't have the expected weighted on base in front of me, but I just think that it's infinitely better. Like I just think that he will be a lot better than 175 over your last 15 games. Like that's just crazy. I hope it'll get better, but it just goes to show you that this team is finding ways, man. Despite the fact that they're hitting the ball hard, they're putting together, they don't swing at bad pitches as much, and they draw walks and whatnot. The fact that they're still finding ways to lose really is a testament to them. But it's just, again, let me emphasize again. And could this be slightly inflated by the fact that that they had the extra 2 games to start the season against the Dodgers? Maybe, but for the most part, I don't think that's a thing anymore. They're 4th in runs scored. Like, isn't that so frustrating when I tell you that? The pitching has been dreadful ever since the Rockies series. From starting pitching to bullpen, like, they've been just dreadful. And I think the bullpen will be fine. I really, really do. I just think that they all had, like, the worst possible moment to regress in that Rockies game. But what can I say? It's really rough. It's really rough right now. And I don't blame any Padres fans for complaining. I'm trying to be positive, and hopefully no one's, like, going to attack me for daring to try to be objective and just keep giving reasons for why this team can be better. But at 14-18 with the way they're playing, it's been dreadful. I think they'll get better than this. but it's really hard for me to, from what we've seen from this Padres team and organization over these past few years, it's just too hard to believe that they will. I mean, there are teams out there like the Guardians who I swear are like 4 bats deep and that's it. And they find ways to put up runs, right? Like they're 19-9 right now. I brought up the Guardians a lot, but I'm just giving an example for like that lineup knows how to hit. They have a team. They have a team that knows how to produce in the right situations versus this team, which feels like a bunch of guys who are in their own realm, own focus, and they don't fire on all cylinders. If the offense is firing, pitching falls apart. If the bullpen is firing, the starting pitching falls apart. If the starting pitching gets back, then you're going to have like what you had with the Rockies series where you just blow a 9-4 lead. And then if if you have Jay Cronenworth who looks like he's fully back, Xander Bogaerts becomes a player who looks like he should be in Double-A. That's where we're at, and that is so frustrating. And I understand why fans are jumping ship. And at this rate, I don't know how much longer they're going to keep getting all these sellouts and big time. I saw that they had a great attendance last night for a Monday night game, by the way. Like, incredible stuff. And they keep letting them down. I haven't seen anything like it. It is so crazy how bad this team has been. And I'm not done ranting, though, guys. We're going to talk a little bit about Michael King and Joe Musgrove after just a quick word from one of our sponsors. And that is, in this case, something that's known for being quick. And that's the folks over at DoorDash. Ladies and gentlemen, with DoorDash, you get all your food, groceries, convenience items, flowers, whatever you want, delivered straight to your door. 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash with the code LOCKEDONMLB. So go check that out, folks. Look, if you want to make mom smile, start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with some gifts delivered to your door, and they got you covered with same-day delivery over at DoorDash. It is really, really cool. Again, guys, use that retail code LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash, get all your stuff. Hey, I know I use it, when maybe I want some food, maybe you just want some grubbin, you know what I mean? You could do that as well. Maybe your mom wants some grubbin, maybe some chocolate. They got you covered over at DoorDash, guys. Again, order now with the code LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the Locked On Pod. I don't know why I almost went into my intro. Sorry about that, guys. But let's continue on with the waning final segment of this podcast. 2 things I want to mention. Number 1, Darvish coming back from the IL. I mentioned Musgrove. I don't know if I already said this. I might be repeating myself. I think that if someone gets sent down, he is starting Darvish tonight's game. Darvish has been okay, right? Like, he's been okay. Not great, but he has been disastrous, right? 4.18 ERA. He's not that bad. And at the very minimum, he's given them some innings every now and then. But he doesn't look great. But this is what happens when you, for some reason, inexplicably extend a pitcher who's 36 and, apparently you just had to do that. Don't worry, guys. Oh, that's another positive that I know a lot of people are making where not only Estrada, but it's like, yeah, I mean, if they keep this up, then we're probably getting a new GM. I mean, yeah, that's where we're at right now, guys. Last thing I want to talk about, though, aside from that, is Musgrove and Michael King. I put out on Twitter from the Padres account, and I'm going to actually end this episode on a happy note with a story that I saw from Eddie Helberg. But the last thing I want to mention is I put out a podcast question the other day on Locked On Padres, which is what I use that account for primarily, by the way. I like to use it to poll guys and make general things and maybe, post updates about the show, stuff like that. I use my personal account to tweet more, so go do that if you want the live updates. I said, who are you more concerned about, Joe Musgrove or Michael King? And here's some of the responses. And I thought it was fascinating to me how mixed the response was compared to what I thought I was going to get. I thought I was going to get overwhelmingly Michael King. That did not happen. Rama Murdy says, Musgrove, but I have hope he can get his stuff fixed quickly. At Pusha C, Carlos Guerreva says, gotta be Java Joe. Gerald Ports says, Joe. Timothy Pike says, yes. Agreed. Agreed, sir. Yes. Friar Phil says Joe. Roncho says Musgrove. He's going to have to reinvent himself if that shoulder continues to be cranky. His pitching metrics is mirroring Kyle Hendricks right now. That's unfortunately, while it is like it's like the obvious criticism, I think, to make, the obvious comparison, Kyle Hendricks, that's where we're at right now. Kyle Hendricks for years was he does have that not necessarily in pitch type or the style they pitch, but in terms of just they're more ground ball pitchers. They're not necessarily strikeout machines or anything like that. They don't throw high velocity. Hendricks just exploded at 1.2. To give people an idea, Kyle Hendricks, I believe, was like up there with like some of the best pitchers in baseball in terms of ERA from when he came in versus now, where he's kind of just an afterthought and he's just a bad pitcher. Here's his ERA by year from 2016 to 2020. 2.13, 3.03, 3.44, 3.46, 2.88. And then it exploded to 4.7, 4.8. Last year, he redeemed himself slightly with a 3.7. So again, like, it could be worse, but the Kyle Hendricks allegation is not all that unfair. My guy, Ye Ong, saying, Javier is my biggest concern. Totally fair. Michael Arndt, I never get concerned before the All-Star break. And then someone said, the players weren't concerned last year either. That's conjecture. Believe what you wish. Lots of changes were made. That takes quite a while to sort itself out. Patience is a virtue in all situations, but it's especially useful now. Michael Arndt, with some facts, spinning some wisdom. Steve Owen said he had one of the best sliders in the game, so why did he intentionally change the grip? Very, very strange. It seems like there's some mechanical things he's trying to work out, and it may be that it's possible that Musgrove's injury from last year is worse than we thought. This is the Padres after all, and while they haven't had any like giant injuries occur over these past few years, like past couple, I'll say, we do have to remember the Dinelson Lamet, Mike Clevenger situations, among many others. And what that is that the Padres have a little bit of a track record of not being the most honest and forthcoming about injuries. I think that the Lamet thing is perfect example. The way that was reported, the way it was talked about was like, yeah, he's out for this playoff series, but then we didn't really hear anything more, and then he just became damaged goods, and he's like hopping from team to team as a journeyman. And then Mike Clevenger, they were like, he just needs a scope, and then the next day we found out he was getting Tommy John surgery, and that's the one that they treated like he'll be okay. And it's like all of a sudden you just lost like your two top starters. Like they have shown, and that's just one example. Two examples of the Padres, like they can be very frustrating. Maybe Musgrove is really dealing with something, the thing that shut him down last year that he's still trying to get out of. And that's what a lot of people are saying. Let's effing go, SD, says Definitely Joe. Michael's still young and new to starting. That's a good point. Michael King. Not everyone can be Seth Lugo or Jordan Hicks with the Giants, where they convert from being relievers to starting pitchers kind of immediately. Although it is disappointing because you did see Michael King get a couple starts, get dragged out a little bit longer when he was with the Yankees. And I will say, at least with Michael King, you have seen the whiffs. You've seen the stuff look awesome. Now, I'm worried that this is a Chris Archer situation. I bring up Chris Archer with my friends a lot as a guy who I think he finished like with 220 strikeouts one year, but then his ERA was like 4.8. So like there does come a point where like I don't care if you're getting strikeouts, if you're just giving up bombs every 2 seconds. I don't care if Michael King's supposed to be the fourth starter. He's been so bad that it doesn't really make a difference, right? So let me see if I could find what was his. I'm trying to find the total strikeouts that he had that year. Let me see if I can find the Chris Archer thing really, really quickly. Strikeouts, let's see. He had 252 one year. He had 249 and 233 back-to-back years, and then an ERA over 4. So, like, that's a good example of, like, I don't care about the strikeouts in that rate. But anyway. Chris Finley says, can I say both? Eric Hamilton makes a good point saying, Joe, with his lower velocity on the fastball, he cannot be so wild in the zone, much less margin for error going forward. Agreed. And that's one of the things is that Musgrove has, like, shown that he has expert command of the zone. So now we're in this situation where he's coming out and he's just throwing meatballs to Bryce Harper, and we're like, what's going on here? I do like that his velocity went up. I talked about this on the last episode. I like that he threw the 94 mile per hour pitch his first all season. I do like that. But the fact that he's not getting swings and miss and people are just nailing into him is concerning. I think both of these guys are a nightmare, frankly, which is why I asked the question, and I really appreciate everybody's responses. But I think that at least I feel like with Musgrove, the resume does speak for itself in a lot of ways. Like, I think at some point I do care about that more. King might be a situation where it's like, yeah, he's new to starting, but what if he's just not a good starter? And this is actually just not going to work, and the Padres completely missed on the Juan Soto trade. Maybe. I do remind everyone before you start saying that trade was a miss, it's an F that they were in that situation, not the actual deal. They still did get a lot of much needed pitching reinforcement that they can still work on, and hopefully Brito, Vasquez, those type of guys can get better. And then they did use Drew Thorpe in the Dylan Cease trade. So keep that in mind. They didn't lose the trade in the vacuum, in a sense. But I have seen people posting, by the way, about CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. I know, guys. And again, it's not bad that they made the trade. What's bad is how do you give up potentially 3 impactful players in Mackenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, and James Wood, who is a consensus top 10 prospect, top 6, by the way, if you go to justbaseball.com, a site that I write for. And he's still just in the farm somewhere. So he's going to get called up at some point. CJ Abrams has over 1,000 OPS. He's running all the time. He's not striking out too much. His defense is getting better. Mackenzie Gore slowly developing into a quality starter. It's not bad that you trade those guys. I don't know how you trade 3 major assets for a guy and you don't extend him, but rather you extend every... This is why when people get on me saying, yeah, well, Soto wanted to get paid a lot. Okay, but they look how much money they spent on everyone but him. They paid Xander. That looks bad right now. They extended Manny. That doesn't look great now. They extended Cronenworth. It looks good now, but it was still a weird extension for 7 years. And then you have Darvish. You have Robert Suarez. Why did you make sure to literally extend everyone except for the guy that you gave up your whole future for and the guy that might be able to make up for the fact that Abrams and Mackenzie Gore look like beasts out there? AJ Preller, ladies and gentlemen. But on that note, that's about it for today's podcast. The last thing that I wanted to share, just to cheer everybody up, I saw this story and I thought it was very cute. This from Andy Hellburn. Jurickson Profar hits his 7th career leadoff home run to tie the game. Fun fact: Profar has an Oscar-type statuette in his locker that says Mr. Relevant with his name and the Padres logo. He has no idea who put it there. Okay, so there's a couple things here. First of all, Profar is so great. He's been amazing. It's him, Cronenworth, Merrill, and then now Estrada have been like the best developments I think for this team this year. But man, has Profar been awesome, and I love this. I love that he doesn't know who put it there. I kind of want it to stay that way. I kind of want this to be the mystery that we all talk about and wonder, who is it that got him the statue there? My guess would be Tatis or Machado, because Tatis and him seem to be pretty close. And then Machado, because Machado has a track record of bringing in some swag stuff. He, I believe, is the one that got the swag chain, which I know 2021 it was a nightmare, but when we were good, it was fun, right? When we were good, it was fun when Don is shouting to spin it. Machado's the one who dropped the money to get the swag chain. So it would not surprise me if he dropped the money to get this little Oscar statue. And shouts to Jurickson Profar. And again, I just want to end it on that note to remind everyone that we did have the Dodgers series. We did have the Cubs 8-run comeback. We have had some really cool moments. Tatis has been hitting the ball harder. Some offensive players are better, despite your Bogarts and Machado struggles. Like, there has been evidence that this team has been different from last year. Frankly, even with just the manager, with Mike Schilt really defending his guys. Like, there have been examples. So I want to leave it at that and just remind you that while it is feeling like last year, there have been tangible, like, empirical evidence that they have done things that they did not do all last year. Like, the comebacks against the Dodgers and the Cubs, I literally did not see anything like that all season last year. So I just want to throw that out there. It's something. Just keep it in mind. Try and have hope, even if it is hard these days. And if you don't have hope, I totally understand it, because these Padres seem to hate their fans more than anybody. Let me tell you. But with that all being said, everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as on the old YouTube. In terms of the future of this show, we're going to be recapping tomorrow's game. We're probably going to be doing a crossover with my old buddy Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks for this weekend series against the D-backs, and many other things. I don't fully know yet. I don't know. Keep sending in your questions. DM me on Twitter, whichever account. Send some YouTube comments. Maybe we'll answer those as well in the future. There will be plenty to talk about for sure. And hey, if you want, go check out my show, Baseball versus the World, where we're talking about ranking the City Connects on today's episode. By the time you hear this, it'll be almost out. So look forward to that if you want. But until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies. Take care.